Black privilege in America today. Just handing you guys everything. You guys get everything handed to you. Don't have to work for anything.
It's crazy.
White people being kicked to the bottom. White people being discriminated against.
Don't forget BET. They're also jealous of white people we accomplished in this country. You're also jealous of white girls because there's so much pretty... shut the hell up. Nobody wants your white women. I blurred her face because this looks like a child that he's talking to. A black child. Again, a child, unsupervised. But he's trying to convince her that black privilege exists. And just the fact that she looks underage is already weird. The idea of black privilege didn't come from research, data, or history. It came from discomfort. It usually shows up the moment conversations about racism, inequality, or history start getting specific. The second someone brings up police violence, discrimination, or systematic barriers, somebody jumps in and says,
black privilege.
Black privilege.
Black privilege.
Black privilege.
Black privilege.
So instead of engaging with the issue, the conversation gets flipped. The focus moves away from harm and towards the vague idea that black people somehow have advantages nobody else has. That's how black privilege becomes a talking point. Not because it describes reality, but because it's useful for shutting conversations down. When people claim black privilege exists, they usually point to a few surface level things. Black History Month, they mention scholarships for black students, diversity programs, and they mention representation in media. Another thing that they do is fabricate crime stats or try to push a false narrative about crime that doesn't exist. And then they act like those things cancel out centuries of exclusion. But here's the issue. None of those things function like privilege. If somebody racks up arrests and still walks free, that's a broken justice system. It's not black privilege. And what's really sickening to me is watching people use tragedies like this to push anti-black fear.
Black privilege is being given affirmative action which advances you in jobs or colleges based on your skin tone. Black privilege is when you can be overrepresented in certain fields without people trying to amend it.
Mean to you Black History Month?
It means that that's racism because they don't celebrate White History Month. We don't have it. I'm part Italian. I don't have Italian History Month.
Which race is able to get into college with lower than standard test scores? Oh yeah, black people. Whether it be hiring practices through DEI, affirmative action, or CRT, it would seem that there's far more evidence of black privilege than there ever is of white privilege. And even when more than half of the black community is receiving government help, you're more concerned with killing your communities and families more than fixing your communities and families. This is not racist rhetoric. This is statistical fact.
It's not statistical fact. There's a lot of things wrong with what it just said. And yes, you heard the it part correctly. Acting like it was only black students that got admitted with lower test scores is completely false. Athletes, legacy admits, and rich donor kids of every race got in with lower numbers too. And not to mention, white women benefited the most from affirmative action policies. Somebody's gonna say, well, that's due to per capita. But it wasn't just per capita. It had a little bit to do with it, but it was not the entire reason at all. White women saw the biggest gains because gender was built into the policy, they were a large group, and many already had access to education and hiring pipelines when doors started opening. Privilege is built-in advantage. It's something that helps you before anything goes wrong. It lowers your risk. It cushions your fall. What people call black privilege only shows up after harm has already happened. And even then, it's limited. Black History Month exists because black history was erased.
The Trump administration told the National Museum of African American History and Culture to remove improper ideology and scrub exhibits that focus on systemic racism. Members of the administration have consistently minimized the horrors of slavery and discounted its foundational role in shaping America. Trump also removed memorials honoring enslaved people across the country. And it doesn't really stop at the museums. It's become pretty widespread. The Pentagon mistakenly removed and then had to restore after pushback Jackie Robinson's military biography. The same thing happened with Harriet Tubman's archives in the National Park Service. Trump also ordered national park gift shops to remove items promoting DEI.
Scholarships exist because access was blocked. Diversity programs exist because discrimination was normal. Those aren't advantages. Those are responses to wrongdoing. And not to mention, most of these things don't even reach the majority of black people. A scholarship existing doesn't mean everyone qualifies. A program existing doesn't mean it's well funded or effective. And the moment those programs show any impact at all, they're usually challenged, defunded, or labeled unfair, which tells you they never meant to level the field, just to acknowledge the problem quietly.
Ahead of today's decision yesterday, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled 6-3 to ban affirmative action programs at universities nationwide. The court ruled that affirmative action admission programs violate the U.S. Constitution's Equal Protection Clause. For decades, state colleges in Georgia have sought to have racial diversity on campus. To do that, they wanted to know the race of the person who was applying, and they would sometimes use that information as one of the factors to help them decide who gets accepted.
It's a part of a list, a plethora of things. They consider your academics, they consider your extracurriculars, they consider your community service.
A big misunderstanding comes from confusing visibility with power. Seeing black people in commercials, movies, or award shows doesn't mean black people control systems. Representation doesn't change who owns companies, who controls housing, who sets policies, or who gets the benefit of the doubt.
So you feel like us as a society has pandered?
Of course we've pandered to blacks. They're in every TV commercial. They get more privileges to come into society. They come into every college on preferential with lower test scores. You can't ever say anything negative. You can lose your job. You will have your entire life obliterated if you say something racist.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm just glad we don't have to hear that anymore. It was too many lies. I already touched on the affirmative action. Let's move on. Black History Month doesn't give black people extra rights. It doesn't lower our chances of being stopped by police. It doesn't increase our odds of getting approved for loans. It doesn't protect us from discrimination at work. It's recognition, not insulation. Privilege protects you even when nobody's celebrating you. And black people don't have that. A lot of representation is also cosmetic. It looks good on the surface, but it doesn't change decision making behind the scenes. The power stays in the same hands. And when representation does challenge narratives, it's usually met with backlash. That alone shows it's not privilege, because real privilege doesn't need permission to exist. If black privilege actually existed, you'd see it in outcomes. You see black people living longer, owning more homes, holding more wealth, getting lighter sentences, being less likely to be stopped, searched, or killed by police. But the data doesn't back that up at all. Across health, housing, education, employment, and the justice system, black Americans still come out worse, even when income is controlled for. That's not privilege. You don't call it privilege when somebody has to work twice as hard for half as much and gets blamed anyway. And when black people reach the same income or education, the gap still doesn't close. That's important because it shows this isn't just about effort. If privilege were real, success would multiply. Instead, black success is treated like exception, not the baseline. A lot of white people feel like black people have advantages because they're used to being centered. When society makes even small corrections, acknowledging history, addressing discrimination, or trying to include people who were left out, it feels like something is being taken away. But equality feels like loss when you're used to being the default. Black-focused programs don't exist to give us an edge. They exist to close gaps that were intentionally created, and most of them don't even do that effectively. So when someone calls that privilege, what they're really saying is they don't like not being the only priority anymore.
Saying you argued that other races can have their spaces if they feel like they need it, but not white people.
Yeah, that's because white people are privileged. We are at the top of the social hierarchy in the U.S.
One of the privileges I think that's most glaring is, it was just struck down, but affirmative action. So for example, students of color getting preferential treatment over white students. I feel like that's a form of racism.
Racism against white people?
Yeah.
Girl, no, white racism does not exist.
Black privilege is the most prominent form of privilege in America today, and we have examples to prove it. There was a large group of teenagers that ran through Chicago terrorizing the city. They were vandalizing, they were lighting cars on fire, they were attacking tourists and residents. They even went ahead and they attacked a white girl walking into her apartment building. About 30 of them started punching and kicking her on the floor as she was trying to escape, violently. This is black privilege. And the reason why it's black privilege is because there is no major investigation going on. The FBI is not looking into this. There's no hate crimes being, possibly dished out.
Again, that is an issue with the justice system. But what he won't admit is that black people are disproportionately affected by harsher criminal sentences. And it's been that way since forever. He's trying to paint this image like black privilege helps us get away with all of these crimes. Based on data, it's not true. Yes, you have instances where people get away with crimes. It's unfortunate, but it happens. Not just on our side, on every single side. Justice may not have been served like how it should have been. Again, that is a problem with the justice system. And that reaction always gets louder during economic stress. When things feel tight, people look for something to blame, and fixing inequality gets framed as favoritism. Rather than asking why the gap exists, it's easier to claim the system is rigged the other way, even when the numbers don't clearly support it. Another reason the idea of black privilege sticks around is because it's useful. Not as a description, not as analysis, but as a weapon. The moment something gets labeled black privilege, the rules of conversation change. Anytime black people speak up, it gets brushed off as entitlement. Any pushback gets called ungrateful, and any demand for fairness gets flipped into asking for special treatment. That's the real purpose of the phrase. If a black person talks about discrimination at work, the response becomes, you already get the advantages. If a black student talks about unequal treatment in school, what more do you want? If black communities talk about policing or housing, suddenly it's, y'all have it better than you think, or the world is catering to you.
But it's so funny because if you're poor and you're black right now, I would say the entire country and world is catering to you.
Black privilege is the fact that this woman could literally just go to her boss and say that someone was racist and get her fired. That's black privilege. Black privilege is the fact that you can have a beauty pageant only for black people. Black privilege is the fact that you have scholarships only for African Americans. If white people had any of that, it would be called discrimination. It would be called racism.
The phrase isn't meant to explain conditions. It's meant to shut people up. Pay attention to when black privilege gets said. It only shows up when black people are visible, vocal, or pushing back. It never shows up when people are struggling quietly. Never when neighborhoods are underfunded. Never when the outcomes are obviously worse. It only shows up when black people stop accepting conditions as normal. So the phrase turns into a warning. Not always said directly, but clearly implied. Don't complain. Don't push. Don't ask for more. And that's how you know it's not real privilege. Real privilege doesn't need this kind of defense. Real privilege doesn't have to accuse other people of having it just to justify keeping things the same. Black privilege isn't a social advantage. It's a social leash, a way to discipline black behavior without ever addressing black conditions. Black privilege survives online because it's simple, and it feels good to some people emotionally. It lets people feel like victims without having to engage with history. It lets them dismiss real issues without sounding openly racist. And it turns structural conversations into personal complaints. Instead of asking why inequality exists, the focus shifts to why black people are even allowed to talk about it. And once the conversation becomes emotional instead of factual, it gets easy to ignore the data, the history, and what's actually happening. That's the real function of the argument. Not to explain anything, but to stop explanation altogether. Social media makes this worse. Outrage and shortcuts are rewarded, and a phrase like black privilege spreads way faster than any real explanation ever could. And once people hear it enough times, it starts to feel true, even without evidence. Familiarity replaces accuracy. Black privilege doesn't exist because privilege isn't symbolic. It's structural. It's safety. It's access. It's the benefit of the doubt. It's not having your struggle turn into evidence against you. Black people don't have that. What does exist are limited attempts to correct damage that was done on purpose, and even those attempts are constantly questioned, underfunded, and rolled back. Calling that privilege isn't just inaccurate, it's a way to avoid dealing with why those corrections were needed in the first place. And until people are willing to be honest about that, this argument will keep popping up, not because it's true, but because it's convenient. Denying reality doesn't make inequality disappear. It just makes it harder to fix. And the longer this argument gets recycled, the longer real conversations that actually matter keep getting delayed.